Hey, welcome back everybody. Glad to see that you're here. So if you've never met me before, my name is Sharon. Today what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you a short story for listening practice. So this is great if you're an intermediate learner. So you might be wondering why stories? Because stories are fun, and anything that is fun encourages you to listen more. So let's get to it. Here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the worst/best vacation I ever had. So to get started, this takes place when I was 10 years old, so you can see me there. Let me point out who's in this picture. So this is me. That's me. This is my younger sister, Holly. This is my youngest sister, Deanna. This is my oldest brother. Goes by Phil. And this is my other brother, Nate. And of course, there I am, Sharon. So this particular picture was taken, I think 1 or maybe 2 years before this happened. It's the closest one I could find with all of us in it. So you kind of get the idea of how old we were. I was 10 years old. In this picture, I'm holding our dog. Her name is Mandy. She's a dachshund. She's not looking at the camera. Sorry about that. And I don't think you can tell, but this picture was taken right after I was crying. I don't remember why I was crying. I was just upset about something. And of course, you see my older brother goofing off, and then the two younger sisters. Just one woke up from a nap, and the other one just doesn't know how to smile at a camera. So those are the people who are involved. All right, and our destination on this vacation, this family vacation, was Gillette, Wyoming, and so this is our car. It was, I think, a 1986 Buick station wagon. It was, in our opinion, it was amazing. We loved this thing. My mom and my dad were in the front seat in the middle area of the car. So like, if I can draw on here. So like in this part of the car, this was, you could have 2 kids plus a dog cage. Because remember, our dog came with us. We didn't leave the dog with anybody. So the dog was in a cage in like part of the car. Like, I think we put it in one of the footwells. I don't remember. It could have been in the middle between the 2 kids. I can't remember. And then in the back part, there were 3 kids, usually. And we always fought over who got to be in this part of the car. And this part of the car was called the way back. In other words, like the very back of the car, we called it. I want to sit in the way back was what we said. And so depending on who got priority, we sat in the back, and 3 here, 2 here, and my mom and dad in the front. The thing about the way back that was so cool was that you were riding in reverse. So you were facing this direction. So you got to like wave at the cars behind you. It was pretty cool. And then everybody else was sitting facing forward. So that kind of sets you up for how this vacation got started. So another thing you need to understand about my family in order to understand this vacation is that our family didn't have a lot of money. Nor did my aunts and uncles or cousins. We all kind of were working class families. So before we even left on the vacation, my mom told my dad we need to stop at the store called Aldi, which sold really inexpensive food, canned and processed food. She said, we need to stop at the store and pick up, I think it was like several cases of soup. It ended up being about 30 pounds of soup, and they put it on the top of the car. So let me take you back to look at that car. So you see the top of the car up there was where we put our luggage and the dog food. And we also put this canned soup up there because my aunt wanted to save money on soup. So my mom was like, we will bring you soup. So all of that stuff is on the top of the car because all of this area and this area was taken up with kids. So we had a lot of weight on the top of the car. All right, so before we even get on the highway, we pull into the gas station to get some gas to fill up the car. And just going over the bump to get into the gas station, the whole roof of the car went kerplunk. It caved in under the weight of all this stuff on top of the car. And after that happened, the lining on the top of the car started puckering and peeling away from the top of the car. And I'll revisit that later because that kind of makes the journey even more interesting. So that was before we even got on the highway. The roof of the car fell in. All right. So once we get on the highway, in the first mile of the highway, you remember I said there was dog food on top of the car. Okay. And I really don't think anything was covering anything that was on the roof because I was sitting in the way back and I think with my sister and my brother, and all of a sudden we saw little pieces of something falling off the back of the car into the road. And like the cars behind us were like trying to get out of the way. And we realized that it was dog food. So we started, chanting to our dad, like, oh, Dad, it's raining dog food. And my dad, you could see, was getting so upset about how everything was going so far. We had to pull over off the interstate. He went into Meijer, which was the first store on the interstate, and he went to buy a tarp. So this is a tarp, not in snowy conditions, but he put this blue tarp to cover everything on top of the car. So no more dog food on the road. The first stop of our journey was Chicago, which, by the way, let me take you to kind of a picture of what all of this looked like. All right. All right, so here's our journey. I'll zoom in. We have Ohio we're from Dayton, Ohio. And then we had to go all the way over here, right? So we started here. We went through Indianapolis. We came up and we got to Chicago. Now, Chicago is the biggest city so far on this part of the journey. And Chicago is a big city. If you've never been there, it's smaller than New York, smaller than Los Angeles, but maybe the size of Miami. I'm not quite sure. It's a pretty large city. Lots of flights go into Chicago. So when we were going through Chicago, my mom had this rule that we were not allowed to talk while Dad was driving through Chicago because there were so many lanes of traffic. And so it was the rule you had to shut up while Dad was driving through Chicago. After Chicago, and by the way, let me bring that map back up. By the way, we drove continuously the entire time from Dayton until basically Minneapolis. And this is a long, like 11-hour drive. Okay. It's much longer with kids because kids have to stop and eat and go to the bathroom and I don't get out of the car, Mom and Dad. So it was a pretty long drive. This says 25 hours because that's to all the way to the end of the journey. But our first big stop was in Minnetonka, and that's where my grandparents lived. So we'd stop there and sleep overnight at my grandma's house. And usually, I think on this particular visit, we stayed for maybe a week, or maybe 4 days, but a good amount of time. And then our next part of our journey, oh, I forgot. Yes. So the inside of the roof is caving in, right? And so the upholstery here on this top of the car, this is not the car, but this is an example. It starts pulling away and just like drooping, right? Just drooping. And it gets lower and lower and lower the amount of time that goes on. And so at some point it starts resting on the top of our heads in the back seat. So that's exciting. So that happens. Our next stop was in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. So let me bring that up. So Fergus Falls, Minnesota, which is right here. This is actually the town where I was born. My dad grew up in Fergus Falls. And it's in western Minnesota. It's a pretty rural part of the area, part of the state. Most people in Minnesota live in Minneapolis. And so here's some pictures of Pebble Lake, get you an idea of what it looks like. I'll make myself go away. Yeah, it's really serene, very peaceful place to be. Loved it. My dad's family had a very, very small cabin that basically had, it was just one room that had some like little divider walls. So it might have been 200 or 300 square feet. It was very, very small, but we didn't really spend much time in the cabin except to sleep. So, because we were kids and we wanted to play. All right, so the first stop was Pebble Lake. So we stayed there for a couple days and it was lovely. When we were back out on the road, the next place that we stopped was Mitchell, South Dakota. And Mitchell, South Dakota boasts that they are the world's only corn palace. And if you don't believe that they boast about that, take a look at this when you go out on Google Maps. So yes, let me back out here a little bit. So this is South Dakota right here. And look, on Google Maps, it actually says world's only corn palace, right? So they are very, very proud of this. And you might be wondering, what does a corn palace, what does that even mean? Well, what they do is on the outside of the palace, so like, see if I can get it here. All this stuff is all made by stapling or attaching husks of different colored corn into patterns and designs. So if you have any time, you should go out and Google Corn Palace and see. Every year they do it. It's a different design every year. And the year that we went in 1992, it was the 100th anniversary of the Corn Palace. So it has a very long and glorious tradition. All right, after the Corn Palace, we went to Rapid City. So if I take you back out on our map, you can see where that is. So across the state, right here, so South Dakota is this big area here. That's where Mount Rushmore is. That's what's in Rapid City. So Mount Rushmore, you have probably seen this in cultural studies or textbooks about America. So Mount Rushmore is a monument, a national monument that features 4 presidents' faces. Do you know their names? If not, let me share that with you. So this guy here, this is Washington. Washington was the first president of the United States. This one here is Jefferson. Jefferson was president number 3. This guy is Teddy Roosevelt. There were two President Roosevelts. I believe Teddy was the uncle, and Franklin Roosevelt was his nephew. Just to kind of give you some ideas of when they lived, this guy was like late 1700s. Again, late 1700s. Roosevelt was like the early 1900s, the turn of the century. And this guy here is Abraham Lincoln. Usually when I ask my students which presidents they know of Lincoln and they know Washington. And I think that, if you're an intermediate learner, I'm pretty impressed if you know those two. Abraham Lincoln was actually the 16th president, and he lived about 1850s. And he was famous because he was president during the Civil War. Okay, so anyway, so there's Mount Rushmore. So we stopped to see Mount Rushmore. And while we were at Mount Rushmore, we lost the dog. I'm not kidding. We lost Mandy. And it got to be so bad that my parents actually thought about leaving her at Mount Rushmore. And I was like, you can't leave the dog, Mom. And, luckily, I don't even know how this happened. She just showed up somewhere. We just found her, and she was able to continue on the journey with us. And now I will show you one picture of us at Mount Rushmore. I don't like showing this picture because I was a very awkward child. Let me show you what I mean. So this is me and my younger sister, Holly. Holly is blonde. I have brown hair. I am not smiling. She is smiling. We are very much opposites. So there you go. You're welcome. Our fifth stop. We finally get to Gillette, Wyoming. I forgot to mention one thing. Let me bring that up. So before we got to Gillette, Wyoming, there's this place called Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower, let me show you here. So Devil's Tower is also a national monument, and you may have seen it in, I'm going to make that go away. You may have seen it in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Or if you don't know that movie, that's fine, but it was featured in there. So this is what it looks like. And there's still not, scientists, geologists are still not agreed on what exactly Devil's Tower is. Some people think it's the volcanic neck of an extinct volcano. That's what I heard when I was going through college in a geology class. But there's stories behind this, there was a giant bear who clawed at the side of this. I don't know. I remember when someone told me the story of Devil's Tower, there was a bear involved and that he was clawing. I'm sure Google has the answer somewhere. So anyway, we stopped at Devil's Tower, and then after that, we finally made it to Gillette. And I don't think I told you why we were going to Gillette. We were going to Gillette. Oh, I did. Yes. My aunt, she had 4 kids, so my cousins, and we just went out to hang out with them and play with the other kids there. And it was by this time, let me bring you back. This part of the car, it was completely collapsed. But not only was it collapsed, but someone, I know it wasn't me, someone was picking at it and it started to tear. And then these little crinklies were falling out onto our heads. And so, yeah, it just got worse and worse. It torn open, stuff all over our heads. And at the end, whoops, gotta go all the way past this stuff. At the end, on our way home, we saw a beautiful double rainbow. So that brings me to the end of my worst, best vacation I've ever had with my family. So I'm going to put it to you. Have you ever had an awesome vacation or the worst vacation ever with your family? Sometimes they happen at the same time. I would love to hear your comments about your favorite or worst vacation plans. Maybe include links in your comments. And thanks for joining me today for this video, and I'll see you next time.